And look at that. We are live with today's Core 2 A+ study group. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is our pre-show where I am hopefully getting things together, getting my act together here. And at the top of the hour, because you can see we've got 9 minutes left, we will be starting the show. So settle in, grab something cool to drink or maybe hot to drink. And settle in for some Q&A. This first hour, I'll be providing you with Q&A. And in the second hour, I'll take your questions. Technically, you can submit your questions now. You can see if you go to this link, there we go, professormesser.com/QA. You can submit your link there. I can probably open my poll up here so that you can use your digital push pin to show the results of where you happen to be in the world. Hope everybody's doing well. Hello, chat room. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm just doing some last minute checks. We've got Cylons going down here. So we're recording, looking at my stats for the stream, which look very good. We've got a storm coming in. So of course, that's going to be a thing. I have to worry about that. Hopefully it will be done here before it actually hits. It's always a concern. We always don't know how that's going to go. I think everything else is ready, at least on my screen here. Let's do this real quick so that I can have a look at my computer and make sure that everything is indeed cleared off my screen. It is there. About that. Nope. About messages. Nope. All right. We are in great shape. Let's see. We're going to run this here. And now we're going to see how this goes. I hope everybody's doing well. Our dates and times posted for live streams of A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus always. You can always go to the calendar. Go to professormesser.com/calendar or hit the events link at the top of the Professor Messer website main menu, or look at the events channel in our Discord. We're always posting dates and times for that. And of course, all of the replays for all of those are available on our YouTube channel. We've got plenty to go through here. Thanks for checking in, folks. Thanks for being here. Just checking out the chat room. We got about 6.5 minutes before we get started. So we will be there in a moment. In the meantime, folks, as you can see, I've already started. Got a couple of folks in Canada. Got lots of folks in the U.S., folks checking in from the Middle East. We got nobody in Europe yet. Nobody in Australia yet. They'll get here. There's lots going on here. We got Manuel in Chile, passed your Security Plus 701. Congratulations on your 701 exam. The newer version of the Security Plus. Congratulations. That's pretty awesome. That is very exciting. Well done. I love to hear those stories. We got 6 minutes to go. 6 minutes to go. And we'll be going there. John's ready to take his 11:02 Saturday. That's good. Fantastic. That'll be fun. That's a good day to do it too. Do it on the weekend. No pressure. Very casual. And then you got the rest of the weekend to celebrate. That's how I look at it, because you're going to do great. Folks are checking in now from Zéo from France. Looks like somewhere in there. We've got no more folks in Canada yet. We're getting there. We're working on it. One of these is close. Up here in the Northeast U.S., it's getting close. We'll figure it out. I think the newer exams are easier than the original. I'm not sure which original is, and I'm not sure what newer is. But I don't tend to see much difference in difficulty level as these exams go from version to version. Obviously, the content is quite different. There's our 5-minute warning. Content is quite different, of course, between them. But it seems like the difficulty level is about the same. At least I think it is. Oh, well, you're referring back to like the 300 series of the A+, where you had to learn interrupt levels, IRQs. Yeah, I would say probably so. Probably it is easier now that you don't have to worry about memory areas overlapping or IRQ conflicts or any of those things. It's kind of nice. That takes me back to the days where we got the IBM microchannel architecture that figured it out on its own. We didn't have to constantly change dip switches and jumpers just to get everything to work properly. That's good times. Good times. Love that. Oh, man. So, all new questions today. Got these all ready to go. I made these questions like 2 weeks ago, and of course now can't remember any of them. So it'll be new for me too. That's always fun, right? Folks are checking in from Miami and Houston and South Africa and Dayton, Ohio, Tacoma, Washington, Colorado. The UK is here. We've already mentioned the folks that we're seeing online on our virtual map, putting a virtual pin in the virtual map virtually. Everything is virtual. Virtual. Oh, got to get that. I like this mouse pad too. For those of you that kind of see the mouse pad, it has kind of got this. It used to be completely black, and then I swapped it out for this newer one, which does seem to look like a topography map, which is kind of nice. I needed something with a little bit of something to look at here. And it's big. It goes from one side. This is one end of the mouse pad. This is the other end of the mouse pad. So effectively everything is on the mouse pad. It's just one big mouse pad, which helps because it's one big mouse. That is a super large mouse. That's my hand on top of the mouse. It's just a monster. And it goes back to there. So it's super large. I should probably put that in my studio config so everybody can see it. Let's do a quick last check. We'll make sure cameras look good. They do. Everything's sort of working out okay. The setup and the configuration has been slowly shrinking over time. So this used to be equipment in a different room and running cables, and the lights were hung from the ceiling, and now it's just everything that runs this is now in the desk, in or on the desk. So it's completely self-contained. There's one Ethernet cable going out to the rest of the network. There's one power connector going into the wall. That's it. And so it's so much more elegant. It's so more streamlined to be able to do that. So it works out great this way. In the chat room, we got Malk. Hey, Malk, welcome. Thanks for joining us again. Malk says, hope you're doing good. We are doing good. We're doing great here. Does the room get hotter now with all the equipment in it? No, it does. It does not really. Much of the equipment, you really can't see it here. Let me get rid of my lower third here. This is a closed-in 19-inch rack, which is on both sides. And when I'm in this mode where I have live stream going, it is a little warmer. When I'm shooting video for the courses, it is a little bit warmer. So it does heat up quite a bit. But it got the air conditioning on, and it's fine. So it's not so much that you have to worry about it as if it was a data center. Really, it's one computer right here, bunch of monitors. Really, it's the lights and the additional streaming video content machinery, the literal machinery down here that creates all the heat. And once the live stream is over, lights go off, no more video transmission. It's just a normal desk. So it works out. The mouse is a hand shoe mouse from Hippus, Hippus. If you want to see what we have here in the studio, you can go to professormesser.com/studio and be able to see all the equipment and what we've got here. What video switcher is this? What is this audio thing over here? What are we using for this crazy mouse? What type of keyboard? Those types of things. It's all on there. The room I wouldn't say the room is soundproof. In fact, it is still quite a bit echoey in the room, but my microphone that I use helps quite a bit with that. But I do try to make it so that it is difficult to kind of hear what's going on. Well, as you can see, it's top of the hour. That means it's time to do a live stream. Let's see if we can get some things started right now. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April 2024 Professor Messer 220-1102 Core 2 A+ study group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and then we get to see how much you know about those topics. If you are here live, you will be able to contribute and put your vote in for these questions as we're here live. If you're watching this on the replay, just keep hanging out in the replay, because we will go through every single one of these and you'll be able to follow along with exactly what we are doing. Thanks for joining us today. We got quite a bit to go through. I have all brand new questions, of course, as I do every month. And of course, you're able to participate live by popping open a new browser window and going out to professormesser.com/QA. That particular link is the only place you have to go. You just stay on that page and everything else will change in front of you. Now, if you do that, there will be a question waiting for you on the page. So this is something also that we do, is the very first question of the study group is what we call our rewind question. The rewind question is one that is from last month, so you may have seen it before, but it's a good chance for us to get in and try to make sure that we're able to answer these online. Our only rule with answering these questions is that you do not answer the question in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow this question and answer it using the link on your screen. The question says, a company is processing payments using downloadable software from the internet at no cost to the company. Which of the following would best describe this software? Is this PCI DSS, EULA, closed source, GDPR, or FOSS? So we have 5 options to choose from. So this is one from last month, so it might look familiar to you. This is the only one you're going to get from last month. Everything else after this is brand new. So let's see how you do with this question. We're going to come back to this question in just a moment. In the meantime, I want to welcome you and thank you for being here. Of course, we do one of these study groups for our Core 1 and Core 2 once a month. We had our Core 1 study group 2 days ago. We're following up today with our Core 2 study group. Next week is Network Plus for our study group, and the week after that, Security Plus. And then in May, we do it all over again. So we always like to have brand new questions every time, though. So that's one nice thing. If you come next month, it's a whole new set of questions, which is nice to always be top of mind with the things that are available. When we are not here performing these live streams, you're able to find us in our YouTube channel. Go to professormesser.com/YouTube. Be super awesome if you were able to subscribe to that particular channel, or perhaps even give this video a thumbs up. We, of course, have our daily A+ pop quiz questions. You'll find those on the service formerly known as Twitter, which I think is their new official name, at professormesser.com/Twitter. You can also find a version of this with a pretty picture over on Instagram at professormesser.com/Instagram. Just another way to keep track of what we're doing here. Sometime in this first hour of the study group, I will provide you with instructions on how you can receive a Continuing Education Unit credit, or CEU credit. This Continuing Education Unit credit is used for renewing your certification, which means if you don't yet have your A+ certification, none of this really matters. But if you do have your A+ certification, or you need some type of professional continuing education, this is one way that you can receive a 1-hour webinar category CEU. Just listen in sometime during this first hour, and we'll be sure that you have that information you need to be able to receive that CEU. Also want to let you know that we're going to be talking today exclusively about the 2201102 exam. We often refer to this as the Core 2 exam. This exam was released on April the 20th of 2022, which means we think this exam will probably be around till somewhere around November of 2025. So as we sit here in April of 2024, you've got plenty of time to be able to get through this by November of 2025. So don't even have to think about retirement dates at this point. The exam itself is a 90-minute exam with a maximum of 90 questions. You might get fewer than 90 questions. The exam score that you need to shoot for on this Core 2 exam is a 700 on a scale from 100 to 900. So the challenge with this, of course, is we don't know how CompTIA grades their exams. We know that every question is worth a different number of points. So this could be one of those situations where it really doesn't matter how it happens. All we care about is at the end of the exam, the number is a 700 or higher. And that's really the important part of that. The Core 2 exam and the questions that we're going to cover today cover topics such as operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. So I will go through at least one or more questions in each of those categories today. That'll give us an idea of different things we may want to work on or study for as we work towards our Core 2 exam. I'll also let you know that this will be available for replay immediately afterwards on the YouTube, but I also create an audio-only version that is distributed in a podcast format. So if you have a favorite podcast listening program that's built into your mobile device, or you like to maybe you spend time on Spotify and like to listen to podcasts on Spotify, we're there as well. You simply can join by going to professormesser.com/podcast, and you can join that in the podcast form as well. This is one where we have podcasts for the A+ study group for Core 1 and Core 2. We have a Network Plus and a Security Plus version of these replays in podcast form. You'll also notice that about a day after we do one of these live streams, that the YouTube video description will be populated with timestamps that allow you to jump to exactly what you were looking for in this video. These don't happen automatically. There's no easy way to do these. So my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this, hi Lori, she's going through and probably at 2x speed, listening in to what we're doing and manually putting in those timestamps. And we can go back for at least the last number of years to find information and be able to locate where it happens to be in this video, which is very, very convenient. Hopefully you've been able to take advantage of that. Also let you know that we have our Discord available. When I'm not here doing a live stream, I'm usually in the Discord. You'll find me along with a lot of folks who are studying for their CompTIA exams. It is a fantastic community of people trying to learn A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and even other types of topics that are IT related. It is all at professormesser.com/Discord. So that's a really good place to go. Even when I'm not there and being active, there's always someone who's doing their own study group. You're able to open up a room and manage the room by yourself. So if you'd like to perform and have your own study group, you can simply load up and click on that link inside of our Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. Well, eventually you're going to need to take your exam. I'm hoping you're planning to take your exam. And when you do that, you will need to pay for this exam. You could certainly go to the CompTIA website and pay full price, but why would you do that? Because if you happen to be in Canada or the US, you can get a discounted rate on your voucher by simply visiting professormesser.com/vouchers. You don't need a coupon code. You don't need to install anything in your browser. All you need to do is follow the links and you'll be able to purchase one of those discounted vouchers, which is already discounted on the website. One thing that you get on my site that is different than anywhere else on the internet is if you buy a voucher from me, you also get a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook that is not available for sale. You only get it if you have already purchased my Success Bundle, where it's included for free. And the only other place you can get it is if you purchase a voucher on my site. This is a list of tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years for taking these CompTIA exams. And there's some tips in there that you can even use during the exam itself to get a few extra points. That's the idea anyway. So we'll see. That's just something that's included automatically for free when you purchase the voucher at professormesser.com/vouchers. Well, let's now go back to that question we asked earlier. The question is, a company is processing payments using downloadable software from the internet at no cost to the company. Which of the following would best describe this software? Is it PCI DSS, EULA, closed source, GDPR, or FOSS? Let's see what you chose in this example. We have 58% of you that chose FOSS, F-O-S-S. 16% said PCI DSS, 12% said GDPR, and now in the single digits, we have 6% that say EULA and 5% that say closed source. Well, the key here is that we are using downloadable software from the internet at no cost. So it doesn't really matter what the software is doing. In this case, it's processing payments. It could be an imaging program. It could be a browser. It might be a file transfer program. It might provide you with an amortization schedule, but it's downloadable software and it's free to the company. In that particular example, we refer to that software as free and open source, especially if we're able to get access to the source code. That is one of the primary advantages of this free and open source. I guess the free part probably is the primary. The open source part, I guess in some cases, can also be primary. They're both important. And this is why you as the end user can look through the source code yourself. You can find the information inside of that source code that you might want to verify or change, and you can make any change you'd like. This is something that is done all the time. Then you can compile the software yourself and you know exactly what this software happens to do. Free and open source software is a lot different than commercial software that you might purchase from Microsoft or Cisco or other companies, because in that case, they simply give you an executable. You have no idea the source code for that particular software. And another term we had in this question was a EULA. A EULA is the end user licensing agreement. In this case, we weren't asking about how the software was licensed. We were asking how the software would be described. And in this particular case, the description being free software available to the company, the only one of these that makes any sense is FOSS, the free and open source software, and 60% or so of you chose that one. It would not be PCI DSS. In fact, there's nothing about this particular question that states that the software that you're using complies or is related to anything associated with PCI DSS. In fact, you may be processing payments, but you may be processing payments using software that uses a third party, and the company may not even be, it may not be necessary for the company to be compliant with PCI DSS. So in this particular case, PCI DSS does not apply or does not best describe what the software happens to be. PCI DSS is a compliance requirement and doesn't describe software. It describes how you store data. And transfer data. We also have GDPR. GDPR, an important privacy and data repository set of rules and regulations in the European Union. In this case, the general data protection regulation doesn't really apply to this particular question because we're not talking about storing data. We're talking about what is this software called? How would we refer to this type of software? And GDPR is not a type of software. It's a type of compliance and type of legal requirement. We did already mention an end-user licensing agreement, so we know it is not a EULA. And then finally, closed source. We also mentioned it's not closed source because we know that it was available at no cost to the company, which means technically that could be closed source software. Maybe the software, the folks that made the software are just giving it to you for free. That doesn't happen very often. And in the list of things that are available here, it asked which of the following would best describe the software. Given the options available, closed source is certainly not the best description. A free and open source software is the best description. That's the choice you should have selected, and about 60% of you did. And if you didn't, now you know a lot more about software and licensing and regulations, and now you're ready for any of those topics if they happen to show up on your exam. Well, let's talk about the exam, because for those of you that have not taken these exams before, one of the things you may not realize is that the exam is much more than simply multiple choice questions. The question we just had was a multiple choice question where there was a question and then multiple options to select from. And in fact, if you didn't know the answer to this question, you still had a 20% chance of getting it right. Well, CompTIA wants to see if you know better than that. Let's get away from having a situation where you could guess at the particular answer, and let's have you step through a number of processes that would give us a better idea of what you know or perhaps what you don't know about these exam topics. So CompTIA starts their exam with a handful of questions they call performance-based questions. Performance-based questions are simply anything that is not a multiple choice-based question. So it could be fill in the blank, it could be a matching question. You may have to put things in a particular order. Maybe you have to put things in a drag and drop type scenario. So there's lots of different ways to ask a question, but the questions themselves all come from topics that are already listed in the exam objectives. So they're not asking you about something you don't know. you should absolutely know the content they're asking. They're just asking it in a different way. I think a lot of people get very concerned about the performance-based questions. And in reality, you probably already know the content anyway. So as usual, on our study groups, the very first new question of the study group is a performance-based question. And here is your performance-based question of the month. This one is a matching question, and it asks, match the function to the Windows 10 utility. Some utilities will not have a match. So we have 4 descriptions and we have 7 utilities. So there's a little bit of a difference there as we step through them. So let's go through what the 4 descriptions are, and then I'll talk about the 7 different utilities. The 4 descriptions are: view the number of incorrect login attempts. The second one is create a redundant drive array. The third is transfer a file to a remote site each morning. And the fourth is install a new wireless keyboard. Now we have 7 different, is it 7? Yes, 7 different utilities here. And the 7 different utilities are device manager, local users and groups, disk management, event viewer, performance monitor, task scheduler, and certificate manager. So I want you to match up all 4 of those things to one of those 7 different utilities. That means that there will be 3 of these left over. I did the math for you. So those 3 that are left over, we simply won't use. But we can think about what those might be. Maybe for extra credit, you should already be thinking about those 3 that are left over. What can you do with those? We can talk about that when we're done here as well. If you think you know the answer, please visit the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. I'm seeing a number of you are already submitting your answer to this question. Matching questions are very common as performance-based questions. You might get one on your exam. There's plenty of options to choose as we go through these. And you'll find that there are various types of performance-based questions. I have a large number. I think I have a total of 15 performance-based questions in my practice exams book. So I wrote a bunch of performance-based questions for people to go through. That's just something that might help you at least get in the mode of what to expect when you sit down for the exam. So if you think you know the answers, maybe you think the answers are already in order, you simply type 1A, 2B, 3C, and 4D. Just submit that and you're good. I have a feeling that's not the actual answers on this one. I think it's probably a little bit different than 1A, 2B, C3, 4D. So not what you want to do. Let's see how you did with this one. Let's step through each one of these and see if we can match them up ourselves. So we'll start with the very first one on our list, which is view the number of incorrect login attempts. And if we look at all of the different utilities that are there, the one that makes a lot of sense is Event Viewer. This is why it's important to be familiar with Event Viewer, because there's so much information in there. For the same reason, it's important to be familiar with Event Viewer, because there's so much information in there. You really need to be familiar so you can parse it out and filter through all that information. It's almost just as important you know where the data is stored as how to get to the data. Both of those are super important. So Event Viewer is our answer for our first one, which is view the number of incorrect login attempts, and all the security data along with all of the other log files are located in Event Viewer. Next on our list is create a redundant drive array. Well, obviously creating a RAID array, which is what this is implying to us, requires that you manage the disks in some way. And one of the best ways to manage disks in Windows 10 is through a utility called Disk Management. Not a lot of extra thought put into that one. It does exactly what it says it does. It manages these disks, allows us to view the status of the drives and to group drives together into a number of different RAID configurations. That's all available inside the Disk Management utility. The next on our list is transfer a file to a remote site each morning. Transferring files and doing it each morning, kind of an automated process. Well, given the different utilities we had to choose from, you've probably chosen F, which is Task Scheduler. This means that it will perform that task every morning automatically without you having to think about it, without you having to type anything in. without an alarm going off and you having to move over to a keyboard and type in information. Being able to automate these functions is a core part of anything that we do in information technology, and one of the best ways to transfer a file to a site every morning, given the options we had available, were indeed the task scheduler. And fourth on our list, the last one, is install a new wireless keyboard. I wonder what they got. I'm always interested in whoever got the latest keyboard. I want to know. And if you're installing a keyboard, a mouse, a video card, or any other type of hardware, you're probably going to at some point need to use Device Manager, especially if you're troubleshooting a problem with the installation of that keyboard. Device Manager is where all of the device drivers and configuration options for those device drivers are located. So we're able to go into the control panel, into Device Manager, and be able to turn on and off a device, see how the device is configured, see if it's working as expected, and set any specific hardware parameters for that device. That is the best choice given the 7 that were available on our slide. This is an important part of this exam, is knowing when you would use certain utilities, what those utilities are, and where you would find them. And this sort of points us in that direction with this question. Well, that means there were 3 that we did not use. The one was local users and groups. This is a utility that many administrators will use to configure the local logins. Now, if you're working in an enterprise or almost any company, there's probably a domain controller and you have your devices all managed through that central Active Directory infrastructure. When you have that particular scenario, username and passwords are all stored in that central database. You don't have to log into everybody's individual machines to configure individual usernames and passwords. But if you are not in an Active Directory environment, maybe you have a few systems at home, you may want to configure local logins so that you can log in, your spouse can log in, your kids can log in, and they all get their own part of the computer and their own screens and their own configurations. You would manage those users in the local users and groups utility. Next on our list, Performance Monitor was also not chosen. Performance Monitor is a nice utility to get an overview of how a system may be performing. We can view information about CPU, memory, drive access, and a lot of statistics about what's inside of our devices. There are well over 100 different metrics that you can monitor over time. And if you're trying to capture a problem that is occurring randomly or sporadically, and you would like to monitor some core statistics to be able to perhaps catch it when that problem occurs, this is a great utility to use. It usually rolls everything up in 1 second or 5 second intervals, sometimes even longer. So it's not for a millisecond level granularity, but it does give you an idea about how the temperature inside of a system has been going, how much free space is available on the drives, how much are those drives being used, how much CPU utilization is occurring. You can view everything about that inside a Performance Monitor. And the last one on our list is Certificate Manager. If you're someone who is managing certificates, these can be web server certificates, device certificates, application certificates. There are certificates for a lot of different things, and those can all be managed in the aptly named Certificate Manager. It's a great place to go. None of the scenarios we had here had us modifying, adding, or removing any type of certificate, but if you needed to, you could probably go to Certificate Manager to do that. Certificate Manager, Option G. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of things that you can use for this. So for those of you that were keeping track of what you were doing, view the number of incorrect login attempts is Event Viewer. Creating a redundant drive array is Disk Management. Transferring a file to a remote site each morning is Task Scheduler. And installing a new wireless keyboard is Device Manager. And if you chose all 4 of those, you got this question absolutely correct. Now, it does lead us down this road because a number of people in the chat room were saying, well, I got 3 of 4 correct. That's not bad. But on your exam, do you get partial credit if you get 3 out of 4? Because we almost got it right. That's a 75% of the question is right. But do you get credit for that? CompTIA does have a frequently asked questions file on their website where they talk about that specific scenario. And is partial credit given for these performance-based questions? And they were able to provide us with a very definitive maybe. If you see, look on their website, it says sometimes we give partial credit, sometimes we don't give partial credit. That I know probably doesn't help any of us as we're trying to figure it out, but at least the idea is there that you could get partial credit. And on a question like this, I would like to believe that we get partial credit. So we'll just go with the faith and the hope that we get partial credit for this one. Let's now shift gears back to multiple choice questions, something we're all familiar with. The next question on our list asks this question, and it says, when connecting to a wireless network at work, individuals are prompted for a username, a password, and a code from a phone app. Which of the following would best describe this authentication? Is it MFA, Kerberos, LDAp, TACAX Plus, or Radius? Now, if you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen to answer this question. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. This is one where we're going to try this without any type of input. No Googling. You may not Google to be able to get through this. Instead, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA and take your guess at what this might be, as if we are sitting here in the exam answering what these questions are. This question again asks, when connecting to a wireless network at work, individuals are prompted for a username, a password, and a code from a phone app. Which of the following would best describe this authentication? Is it MFA, Kerberos, LDAp, TACAX Plus, or Radius? Lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA to be able to answer this one. Let's see how you do with knowing what these particular answers or the answer to this particular question might be. So this is one where we do need to know all of these different technologies, and all of these answers, of course, do come from the CompTIA exam objectives. So make sure you're familiar with those objectives and what the different options might be. Let's see how you did with this one. A lot of people locked in their answers pretty quickly with this one, which makes me wonder how we did. The question again asks, when connecting to a wireless network at work, individuals are prompted for a username, a password, and a code from a phone app. Which of the following would best describe this authentication? Is it MFA, Kerberos, LDAp, TACAX Plus, and Radius? Well, let's see how we did with this one. We'll close the poll, and we can see that 86% of you, large percentage, say the answer is MFA. I wonder if this is one where we all got it right or we all got it wrong. LDAP came in with about 6%, and then we have effectively a three-way tie for third place between Kerberos, TACAX Plus, and Radius, with around 2 to 3% of this particular distribution. So most of us in this answer said MFA was the choice that they would choose to best describe this authentication. Well, this is one where if you are familiar at all with authenticating into a corporate environment, you're probably doing some type of multi-factor authentication. That means that you are using more than one factor to be able to prove that you are who you say you are. That's the whole point of authentication, of course, is that you can prove that you're you, even though you're not in the building. We don't have an image of you logging in. We may not even know who you are when you're logging in, but somehow we're able to prove that you are who you are. Now, normally this would just be a username and password. The username is something that's not really private. In fact, you can give out your username to pretty much anybody. That doesn't provide them with access. The secret part that provides the access in that scenario is the password. And that, of course, we don't want to give anyone that password. That password is something you know. It's a single factor if you need to log in and authenticate into a network. But sometimes we need more than just a password. Password's good, but someone might have stolen your password. Maybe they were able to phish your password. We need some additional security. We need another factor of authentication. And so we can use other factors such as something you have, something you are, somewhere you are, or something you do. There are other factors as well, but those are some of the more common ones. And these different factors can be really manifested in a lot of different ways. It could be a signature. It could be a retina scan or a fingerprint or a thumbprint, or it may be something like this, which is an authenticator app that is on your mobile device. And this might give a long number of seemingly random numbers. Certainly not a set of numbers that you could guess. And that number, as you could see, is counting down. It looks like it changes every 30 seconds or so. So every 30 seconds is a new set of, we can call this pseudo-random numbers. It sort of looks randomized, but in reality, back at the server, it knows what the number sequence happens to be, and it's waiting to see if you type in the correct number along with your password. To be able to do this, we have to have our phone. That's the important part. This is an app that is on our phone. So when we start categorizing this as another factor of authentication, this phone is something that we have with us. You would not be able to log in unless you had the number from the app. You don't have the app unless you have your phone. Therefore, this authentication factor is something you have. That's what this is. Something you have to be able to do this. So now we have two factors of authentication, something we know, which is our password, and something we have, which is our mobile phone. That is the authentication factor that we were looking for, this multi-factor authentication. Sometimes you'll see this written as 2FA to describe two-factor authentication, which is the scenario I just described. But you can certainly do more than two. Maybe you have to, and I've seen this before, put in a password, use a fingerprint, and put in a number from an app. There's three factors that you would use. At that point, it becomes multi-factor authentication, certainly with all those different types of authentication factors. So in this case, MFA by far is the right answer. 86% of you chose that one. That is the correct answer. Kerberos, LDAp, TACACS, and Radius are authentication protocols. And behind the scenes, when you're logging in, there has to be some type of process to send your username and password to something that will check and verify that you're using the right username, the right password, and perhaps any of these other authentication factors as well. And there are a number of different well-established protocols that can perform that connection between you and the authentication server. If you're using Windows, for example, in an Active Directory environment, very similar to what we described earlier, then you have Kerberos that is running behind the scenes. Kerberos is one that provides a lot of different functionality, some advanced functionality, certainly in those environments. And perhaps most importantly with Kerberos, it allows for single sign-on. So we can sign on in the morning, and then we don't have to put in our username and password for the rest of the day, even though we're connecting to different resources on that network. LDAP is another very common protocol. Along with Radius, they're certainly two of the most common authentication protocols out there. And if you're in an environment like Cisco, you're probably even using TACACS or TACACS Plus to be able to authenticate using those Cisco devices. But in this case, when we describe using a code from a phone app, that code and the authentication process isn't referring to the protocols, it's referring to the process. And in this case, multi-factor authentication is the process. 86% of you got that one absolutely right. Not really fooling anybody with that particular question. And well done. You did a great job with that one as well. Let's do another question. I have this question available. Let's see how you do with this one. It asks, while removing malware, a technician has enabled system protection. Which of the following would be the next step in the process? Would that be quarantine infected systems, scan and remove malware, educate the end user, verify malware symptoms, or run updates? Those are your 5 different options. While removing malware, a technician has enabled system protection. Which of the following would be the next step in the process? Would it be quarantine infected systems, scan and remove malware, educate the end user, verify malware symptoms, or run updates? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. All of those, of course, are important steps during the malware removal process. That's the process that is documented in your CompTIA exam objectives. But only one of these is what we would do having enabled system protection, something that happens right after that. So see if you can recall what that happens to be and lock in your answer. The answer's not coming in quite as fast as the ones in the last question. So we will have to figure out what the different options might be. If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. You want to go to the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. See how well you do with this one. This is an important one to know. There's a whole section of the 1102 exam objectives, section 3.3, which is all about removing malware. And although it would be unusual to remove malware and keep a system running, sometimes you need to remove enough malware to get access to the system so that you can back up some important files before you delete everything on that system and start from scratch, which of course is an important part of malware removal. Is not really removing the malware, it's really deleting everything and starting from the beginning. That's really the only way to guarantee that you have removed the malware. Any other malware removal process is only a best guess that it actually removed the malware that you were hoping to remove. There's only one way to get rid of malware, and that's nuke it from orbit. Just delete everything and restore your system from a known good backup or build a new system from scratch. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, while removing malware, a technician has enabled system protection. Which of the following would be the next step in the process? Would it be quarantine infected systems, scan and remove malware, educate the end user, verify malware symptoms, or run updates? Let's see what you chose. Oh, we're all over the place. This was not quite as straightforward as the last one, was it? We have effectively a three-way tie for first place, maybe a four-way tie depending on how you look at it. 27% say scan and remove malware. 23% say quarantine infected systems. 23% of you say educate the end user. 19% of you say run updates. And 6% say verify malware symptoms. This is a no-win situation for any of us, I guess. We all came in pretty low on this one to figure out what the answer is. Well, the key is in the question itself, where it says the technician has enabled system protection. We've turned on system protection. And for those of you familiar with the malware removal process, we turn off system protection very early on in the removal process. We remove all of the malware, and only after everything has been removed do we turn system protection back on. So this is a step that occurs well into and really near the end of the malware removal process. In fact, it's so near the end, there's only one thing left to do when you're in the malware removal process, and that is to talk to the end user and talk to them about how they may have received this malware, how their system may have become infected, because very often it is the end user performing some function that does this. And we need to do some type of perhaps one-on-one personal training to tell them how they might avoid this in the future. We might want to put up signs and posters in our workspace so that when people get off the elevator, they can get information about what they could click on and perhaps what they could not click on. It's another one of those. A message board posting online so people can see some ideas about how to prevent this from occurring on their system. Or maybe it's a login message that provides them with more detail. Educating the end user is an important step along these lines because we want to provide us and our end users with a way to prevent this from occurring again, which of course helps you, it helps the end user, it helps the organization, and of course it makes the malware authors really, really angry, and there's no better reason to do that than to make sure that people know how to avoid malware in the future. Educating the end user is what we were looking for. And on our list, 23% of you chose educate the end user. So that is exactly what we were looking for. Quarantining, in fact, well, let's see, which one should I choose first? Let's do the 27%, scanning and removing malware. You would not enable system protection and then go to scan and remove the malware. You have the potential for malware to reinfect your system protection files, those snapshots that are taken for system protection. So scanning and removing malware is not what we would do after enabling system protection. Same idea for running updates. Well, we should have already run updates when we went through the removal process before enabling system protection. So running updates is not the choice that we would choose either. And quarantining infected systems and verifying malware is something that occurs very early in the process because we want to either make sure that, hey, is there malware on the system? I think there is malware. Let's quarantine the system. It's really step 1 and step 2 right there. So that is exactly what we would do to start the process, but enabling system protection is where we're ending the malware process. The only thing left would be to educate the end user. 23% of you did choose that option. That's exactly the one we were looking for, and that is the answer to this particular question. Lot to know about the malware process. If you're not familiar with that malware removal process, it's section 3.3 of the 2011-02 exam objectives. Make sure you have a look at what those options are. Well, as you can already tell in just the questions we've done so far, the 1102 exam has a lot of different topics on it across many different domains, and there are many different little tiny pieces of information that are important to know. And of course, I recommend that you watch all of my videos. They're available for you to watch for free on my YouTube channel, but it's 137 videos. It's a lot of videos. And the videos themselves can take up to 19 hours if you were to play those videos at their normal speed. Well, that's a lot of time to be able to go through those. Not everybody has that time. What if I could take all of the text from every video, all of the important graphics, all of the tables, and put them into a single document? Well, I've already done that. It's my course notes that are available for Core 1, Core 2, and other courses on our site as well. Those course notes cover all of those topics. Here is the digital version of these course notes. You can see that there are how many pages? 56 pages in these course notes, and every video by video is documented in the course notes. All of the command line tools, all of the charts, all of the tables, the important graphics, they are in this set of course notes. It's a great way to have everything at your fingertips. You can take this PDF file, put it on your mobile devices, have it on your laptop, have it on your computer at home. So it's always there. You can always use that as a reference. And it's a PDF that certainly helps. It doesn't replace reading a book. It doesn't replace doing labs. It doesn't replace watching the videos, but it is a great way to have all of that information consolidated into one single place. And if you wanted a printed version of it, we of course have physical versions as well. It's identical to the digital version, but it's one that you can carry with you and take along with you. Full color. It's got information all listed in here that will help you through your Core 1 or Core 2 exam. You'll find them on my website at professormesser.com/1102 notes. And if you get the physical version, then you get the digital version included with that at no additional charge. This is a great way to support what we do as well. Every dollar goes back to keeping this whole thing going. So thank you so much for your support. And for those of you that have already invested in these course notes, thank you so much for that investment. This is something on my website. If you have questions, you can always contact us there on the Contact Us link as well at professormesser.com/1102 notes. Let's do some more questions on this. The next question that we have deals with this. The question asks, an MSP technician is making a change to configuration files on a remote Linux server console. Which of the following would be most likely used for this change? Would it be VNC, RDP, MSRA, SMB, or SSH? It's all abbreviations for this question. The question again asks, an MSP technician is making a change to configuration files on a remote Linux server console. Which of the following would be most likely used for this change? Is it VNC, RDP, MSRA, SMB, or SSH? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will instead use this link to be able to lock in what we think the answer might be. A lot of people getting their answers in quick on this one. I'm watching the numbers go up. That gives me maybe some hope that we bounced back from that last question. See how we did. If you've ever made a change to a configuration file on a Linux server in the console from across the network, maybe you know the answer to this one. That was a very specific set of scenario, wasn't it? We really had to set that one up. If you're planning to push everything over, that's one you really have to go through. And all of the answers here, by the way, are also from the exam objectives. So if you are looking at one of these abbreviations and you're thinking, I don't know what that abbreviation is, I don't know what that is, make a note of it, because you need to go back to the exam objectives and have a look at what that particular abbreviation might be. It might show up on your exam, so it'd be important to know what that is. Let's see how we did with this one. The question again asks, an MSP technician is making a change to configuration files on a remote Linux server console. Which of the following would be most likely used for this change? Would it be VNC, RDP, MSRA, SMB, or SSH? Let's see how you did with this one. You chose 61% by far, chose SSH as the answer. 16% say you would use RDP. 11% said VNC would be the better choice. 6% say MSRA, and 4% say SMB. So you've got a number of different options here. 61% is a pretty good number saying SSH is the answer. And the reason is that that's the answer. SSH is exactly what we were looking for. SSH is secure shell. It is a way to work at the console or terminal of a remote device using a method that provides security and encryption. That's why it's not just shell, it's secure shell to be able to do this. And it's an important part of really connecting to not just Linux devices, but other devices as well. It is one that does come in handy if you're somebody who is working through managing a lot of different Linux devices, routers, switches, Windows servers, and other devices. You'll probably be using a lot of SSH to be able to do this. It is one, if you're going to a remote Linux server console, that should have given us the clue that we were doing something in a console, text-based, on Linux, almost always going to use SSH for something like that. In this case, I added even more abbreviations because there weren't enough abbreviations. I added a managed service provider, an MSP. In fact, this scenario in this question is very similar when I call my cloud service provider that manages ProfessorMesser.com and I say, I want to make a change. Could you change this configuration on these systems? And they use SSH to be able to get into my servers and make those changes for me, because that's just so convenient and so quick and so easy to do something like that. We have other options here. 16% said RDP, that is the remote desktop protocol. We often refer to that when performing screen sharing to a Windows device, but remote desktop protocol is almost exclusively a Windows thing. We would not use remote desktop protocol to connect to a remote Linux device, whether it's the console or not. In this particular case, a Linux server console is not going to be accessible using Microsoft's remote desktop protocol. We have 11% that said VNC. Well, now we're thinking more along the lines of Linux. VNC is something we can easily add into Linux. It's something that's included with Mac OS, for example. Although it's not called VNC, it's simply called remote access in those scenarios, but it is a more of an open source method of screen sharing. And so it would be very common to use VNC for Linux and for Mac OS. Well, why was that not the right answer then? Well, in this case, we were connecting to and making a change to files on a Linux server console. And if we're connecting to a console, we don't need to share the entire screen with the mouse and the graphical front end. We just need to go to the console. And SSH is a much better choice. In fact, the question even says, which would be the most likely one used in this scenario? That's the real important part of this, is there are multiple answers that could be a correct answer, but only one is the one that is most likely used. And you have to make sure you choose the one that is most likely. And for a Linux server console, SSH is much more likely than using something like VNC. MSRA, Microsoft Remote Access or Remote remote, what is it? Remote administration, remote services. I think I have an MSRA slide, remote assistance, isn't it? It is remote assistance, I think. MSRA for remote assistance is one that is built into home versions of Microsoft Windows so that people don't have to load up remote desktop and get a remote desktop server running and doing all of those different pieces. Instead, it's just built into the operating system, and somebody can get, grandma can get MSRA up and running and then tell you what the code is, and then you can connect to the device and manage that. We know what MSRA is used for. We use it all the time, don't we? Because we have family. And that's what that's, but it's a Windows function. It's very Windowsy to be able to do that. So a Linux server console is not really compatible with MSRA at all. And lastly, SMB, the server message block. That is the standard protocol used for a Windows environment to transfer files, to access different shares, to send print jobs. Those all use server message block. That is a Windows protocol primarily. And so for a Linux server console, you're not going to be using SMB. The only option here, the one that is really the two that I would choose would either be VNC or SSH. Those are the only two that apply. And in this particular case, because we're going to the console, SSH wins by far. 61% of you chose that one. That is the right answer. That's the one we were hoping for. And you did a great job on that one. Almost a very large majority on that one got the correct answer. Let's do some more. We've got more questions here. We've got plenty of time. Let's fit another one into the mix. Here's one, has a little bit more detail on it. This question asks, a user has run this Windows command. And you can see the command here, which is netuse $server /project$. That's quite the command. The question asks, which of the following would best describe this link? Would that be encrypted files, remote access, server cluster, hidden share, or inaccessible device? Got some options there. A user has run this Windows command. Here's the Windows command. netuse $//server /project$. Which of the following would best describe this link? Is that encrypted files, remote access, server cluster, hidden share, or inaccessible device? If you think you know the answer, I guess I should put the link up on your screen. There it is. ProfessorMesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See if you happen to know what the answer is. If you're trying to work through what these are, I think many of you know what these different options might be, but how do you access them? What is the command line to be able to access those? And that's really what this question is asking. You need to be a little bit more familiar at the Windows command line to be able to answer this particular question. This should be pretty good if you are working through these challenges. This is a question that is an important one from the exam objectives as well. You are expected to know these in the exam objectives. So make sure you sort through what you believe the right answer is and lock in your answer with the link on your screen, ProfessorMesser.com/QA. We're a lot slower in answering this one, you'll notice. I'm always watching the numbers go up in the right corner of the screen here. And I always try to see and get a feel for, as we're using these, as we're putting answers in, how does that correlate back to a right or wrong answer? And from my very scientific type of analysis, I found it really has no correlation at all. Just as you might expect. We're all over the place all the time. Sometimes we're spot on, sometimes we're not. And it doesn't really seem to have anything to do with time. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, our user has run this Windows command. The command is netuse $//server /project$. Which of the following would best describe this link? Is it encrypted files, remote access, server cluster, hidden share, or inaccessible device? What did you choose? I'm glad you asked. 52%, we just made a majority there, say it's a hidden share. 21% say it is a server cluster. 16% of you say it's remote access. 7% say encrypted files, and then 1%, almost 2%, say that is an inaccessible device. Well, the key here with this question is that it's a regular net use command, which means we want to use or access a Windows share. That's really what the net use command does. Well, what drive letter should I assign to that share? Well, let's assign W. We're not using it currently, so we'll just pick one we're not using, which is the W drive, and we'll put W : to specify that's the drive letter we would like associated with that share. All right, what is the device? Where is this share located? What server is it on? The server has a double backslash in front of it. This server happens to be called, very clearly, server. We didn't spend a lot of time on marketing here. The server name is indeed server. This might be a different name if you have server 1, server 2, server 3. You give it different names. That is the name of the server. And then the name of the share comes right after that, /project. Project is the name of that share. And then if the share itself is one that we don't want people to be able to see using the net view command, then we need to specify that it is a different kind of share that has a $ associated. Anytime we put a $ at the end of it, we're specifying that that share is hidden. It's not protected. It's not somehow locked away from other people, but it's not going to show up in a list or an enumeration of all of the available shares on that server. So this is one where we had a lot of different options to choose from, but in this case, shared resources and using shares in Windows is a very common way to transfer data and have data available for others. In fact, if you log in at work, there are probably a number of shares that are connected automatically when you log in. Maybe there's a public share, maybe you've got a private drive, and maybe there's a drive available for your department. So you may be connecting to 3 shares that are in different places on different servers, but to you, it's the G drive, it's the H drive, it's the W drive. It just depends on how that share is configured in Windows. And it's always that drive letter that we use to specify where that data happens to be. But if there's a share and we put a $ at the end of the share, it becomes a share that is not advertised if people want to query what shares are available on your network. It effectively hides them, very similar to disabling the broadcasts that you would find on a wireless access point. It doesn't make the access point private. It doesn't make the access point more secure. It simply hides it from the list. That's all it's really doing. So that is, in this particular case, that is exactly what we would use to be able to hide that share information. And indeed, that's what we were hoping to find here as well. It doesn't provide any encryption. It's not what this particular command does, has nothing to do with that. And the $ certainly is not providing any encryption. It's not an inaccessible device. Very difficult to connect to an inaccessible device. In this case, the device is there. This command allows us to connect to the device. I guess if ultimately we got a response back saying can't connect to the device, that would be different, but that's not what the question says. So it would not be an inaccessible device. Would not have remote access associated with this. Remote access would be accessing the device from somewhere outside of the building, for example. You're at home and you need to access data that's on the corporate network. That would be remote access. But nothing about this command has anything with remote access. So not the most or best description of what that link might be. Very commonly in Windows, especially on servers that hold very important data, we may have multiple physical servers all providing access to that data. And in Windows, we can put these together into what Windows calls a cluster of servers. This way, if any one of those servers happens to fail or it's disconnected from the network, the other servers in the cluster will continue to function and that data will continue to be available. In this case, the share that we have here with net use has nothing that tells us that it is a cluster, that it's multiple servers. There's nothing there to really choose from. So in this case, that's not our best description of what that link might be, although Unknowing to us, this server may be a cluster of servers. We don't know, but there's nothing about that Windows command that tells us that. So that's not the best answer given the ones that are available. The best answer is the one that the majority of you chose, which is hidden share. It has the $ at the end. That is indicative of a share that is indeed hidden. So hopefully that's one that you chose as well. More than half of you did choose that option. And now you know which options may be more applicable depending on what you have for a net use command, especially if you're using that $ at the end of it. That is a good job. A lot of folks got that one absolutely correct. The 52.29% of you got that one absolutely correct. So well done there. Well, I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I want to squeeze in one more question before we move to the after show part of this. But before we do that, I want to give you a little story about what I found when I started looking around the internet for practice questions. What I found was a lot of outdated websites with outdated questions, a lot of questions on the internet that had poorly written, bad grammar in the questions, and a lot of questions that had completely incorrect and misleading answers. These are not the kind of questions you're going to get in your CompTIA exam. Those third-party sites with their, well, we'll call it low-quality questions, do not prepare us very well for the exam that we're about to walk into. And I thought it might be a good idea to be able to find a set of questions that have been written specifically in the same style as the CompTIA exam. Maybe they're questions that have the same difficulty level as the CompTIA exam. And I wanted to see questions that not only told us when an answer was right, but told us when the answer was wrong and told us why the answer was wrong. And since I wasn't able to find this myself, I thought I need to write these. So I did. I wrote a book that is 3 full practice exams. I realize this is the Core 1 book, but it looks identical to the Core 2 book, at least physically. Obviously, the contents inside are quite different. The practice exams book are there to be able to give you the same feel of an actual exam. It's 90 questions long, 5 performance-based questions, and 85 multiple-choice-based questions in 3 different exams. So that's a total of 15 different performance-based questions. Now you've got 3 other complete exams for multiple choice-based questions. And what's perhaps even better is that there's a lot of extra features in there. Let me show you what I mean. Let's do one of these. This is the PDF, a live view of my practice exams book for Core 2. And this is page 11. So I'm on question A28. And this question asks, it's a big one. A user in the headquarters network has opened a help desk ticket about their Windows desktop. When starting their computer, the login process proceeds normally, but the Windows desktop takes 15 minutes to appear. Yesterday, the desktop would appear in just a few seconds. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Is it a slow profile load, an incorrect boot device order, a faulty RAM, or incorrect username and password? And we can jump over to page 33. I'm on page 11 right now. We can jump to page 33 if we just want to know if it's A, B, C, or D, or we can jump to page 64 if we want to know more about this answer and the particular question itself. So when we get into this and working through it, one of the things that you'll start to find is that you don't want to have to scroll through the PDF and then scroll back. And because it is a PDF, I can even use some annotation features to highlight different parts of it. Or if I think I know what the answer is, I can select it here. But one of the things that are very useful if somebody is working through really understanding what the different options are, I think it's useful to know these links are here. So you'll notice where it says the details, that's a link. So instead of scrolling through to page 64, you just click that and it goes to page 64. Well, why wouldn't you do that? That makes perfect sense. So there's the question at the top of the page, and it tells us the answer is A, slow profile load. So this is one that does come in handy in knowing what that is, because we do give a description of why that is the right answer. It says a roaming user profiles commonly used in an enterprise Windows network, etc., etc. So that gives you at least information on why the answer is right. But as I mentioned before, and this is a problem for me, I always get questions wrong. And telling me why the right answer is right is okay. I want to know why the wrong answer is wrong. That's what's really going to help me understand more about this topic. It kind of brings the learning process all the way around the circle. And so with every question in my book, every incorrect answer is documented. So you know not only why the right answer is right, you know why the wrong answer is wrong. And I think that's a good opportunity to learn more about the topic. In fact, I'll even tell you, if some of you have this book and you are using it and you get the answer right, maybe you chose A, don't be so quick to simply go to the next question on the list. I highly recommend you read through the incorrect answers that talk about, in this case, boot device order, faulty RAM, and incorrect username and password. Those are topics that could appear on your exam as questions. So don't be so fast to go through this particular question. Go ahead and examine not just the right answer, but spend some time examining the wrong answers just to shore up a little more knowledge about those specific topics, because they may show up again in your very near future. Now, if you don't know anything about this question, you don't understand anything about what's being asked of you, down at the very bottom, I even give you a link to the video that was used to create this question to begin with. So this will give you a refresher on the topics, on the technologies, on the abbreviations, on the different nomenclature. And there's a link that is here that you can simply click on if you're in Windows or Mac OS or a different operating system. If you're on your mobile device, there's a QR code that will also take you there. So you can always go to the video to get even more foundational information about the question itself. And since this is a PDF, so now that we're done looking at the question and the answers, we can click the back button in our PDF. Do you even know there's a back button in your PDF? There is. And now we're back where we started. If you want to go to the next question on the list, you simply scroll down and go to the next question. That is my practice exams book. I have these available for Core 1 and Core 2. If you buy them on my website, you can buy them with the course notes and you get a little bit of a discount, a financial discount there. That's always good to get a little bit of money off when you're buying those. You can find out more on my site. Go to professormesser.com/core2pe to learn more about those different practice exam books. Maybe it's something that can help you as you're stepping through and trying to understand, how am I ever going to know if I'm ready to take my exam? Practice exams are a great way to do that. Well, we have hit the top of the hour. I think that probably is a good place to remind you that there are all objectives you need to know for this exam already documented, and it's in a free document on the CompTIA website. If you want a link to get over to that page, you can go to professormesser.com/objectives, where you can download the exam objectives. Those objectives are incredibly valuable. Here's the copy from my desktop. These objectives go through every single thing you need to know, to the degree that I tell people, if you know every single one of these bullets and you can describe how this technology is used either to yourself or to someone else, and you go through every bullet that's in these exam objectives, you're ready to take your exam. It's a great barometer to know how ready you are. And in fact, if you know everything in this list, you're going to have no problem passing your exam, because CompTIA sticks to this list almost 100% of the exam. That's how close they are here to this list of different topics. It's the exam objectives. Make sure you get your hands on those. They're great to read through before you start your studies, and they're perfect to use as a checklist before you schedule your exam. Go to professormesser.com/objectives to be able to get your hands on those objectives. We do these study groups once a month. We do one for Core 1 and we do one for Core 2. Make sure that you check in with the list that we have on Tuesday, May the 7th and Thursday, May the 9th. That's our next set of live events for A+. But we're also doing more events here this month. You can, of course, go to our website and look at the calendar. We've got our Network Plus live event, our study group next week, and we have Security Plus the week after. You can always find out when the next event is going to be by using the events link on our website or visit professormesser.com/calendar. Well, although the first hour is over where I ask the questions, we're just getting started. Stick around for the after show where you submit questions to me and we'll step through and answer any questions that you might have. Don't forget about our course notes and practice exams. You can find those at professormesser.com/1102success or follow the links on the website. We have also got discounted vouchers along with our exam hacks ebook, and you could save some money by visiting our site at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, we're probably on your favorite social media site, probably not TikTok. You'll find us at professormesser.com/discord/youtube/twitter/instagram and others/LinkedIn. They're all available there. Just type in professormesser.com/ and the name of the site you'll like to find us on. And if we're there, it will take you there. An easy way to make that happen. Well, we've got a lot more to go through. Stick around for the after show. I've got a lot of questions to go through. You can submit them at any time at professormesser.com/QA. We hope you stick around for that. Otherwise, we will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Let me take a sip. Let's bring back me. There we go. Hi, everybody. Now it's the time where you can submit a question that I perhaps will answer. We'll see. It's one of those where it probably will happen. The way you would do that is you would go to the professormesser.com/QA link that is right there on your screen. You'll notice that it puts, right now it says you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. And there's probably some questions waiting for me. We will be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution may not appear immediately. In fact, I'll be looking through them to see exactly what might appear. It's my chance to really look through them to understand what the different options are and what the different questions are that are coming in. A lot of questions waiting for us. So I'm going to start going through that list to be able to figure out what the right way to do this might be. So let's start with a number of different questions that have been submitted. This is one I tend to get from time to time. If you start going through the questions, these questions are focused on Core 2, but it doesn't have to be that way. I'll take questions about really any topic you would like to discuss. It doesn't have to be about A+. It doesn't have to be about CompTIA. It doesn't have to be about certifications. It doesn't even have to be about technology. You're more than welcome to submit whatever you'd like. This question asks, why is it so hard to install Mac OS on VirtualBox? I tried it so many times with different versions, but still get errors. Well, this is probably something a lot of you have thought about, and probably because if you notice on the Core 2 exam, you have to know about Windows, you have to know about Linux, you have to know about Mac OS. I think a lot of us have access to Windows. That's usually not a big problem. And Linux is easy enough to download from the internet for free and install in a virtual machine. It installs very well into most virtual machine software. If you got a hypervisor, it's probably going to be compatible and ready to run Linux. In fact, if you're running VirtualBox, which is mentioned in this question, that is a free and a very valuable, usable virtual system that you can configure on practically any operating system. VirtualBox runs great. But the question was about Mac OS. In Mac OS, there's a couple of things you should know first about running Mac OS in a virtual environment. First, you can't legally do that. Apple's end-user license agreement, we talked about EULA earlier in this study group, the end-user license agreement for Mac OS allows it to be run in a virtual environment, but only on Apple hardware. Well, in our particular case, I think many people are trying to run Mac OS on non-Apple hardware because they don't have Mac OS. They're trying to use it as a study tool, study guide. But you can't do that. Apple does not allow it. I don't condone that at all. I think you should not run an Apple operating system on non-Apple hardware because Apple says we don't allow that. And that's pretty much legally what the end-user license agreement is there for. So the real question is, why is it so difficult then for it to work? Well, there's probably a couple of reasons. First, one of the things you may have noticed lately is that the Apple hardware that is being used for Mac OS is no longer using the Intel chipset, using a chipset that Apple has created themselves. It's their own CPU. They effectively have thrown Intel to the side and have decided to create their own chips. And they're doing a pretty good job of it. I mean, the chips that they have created are built specifically to make their software run as efficiently as possible. And they've introduced even some very innovative features to CPUs that normally you would not see on a desktop PC system. So already your Intel-based system running Windows is not compatible with the Apple-based silicon that is running macOS these days. So already there is an incompatibility. Even if you wanted to run the latest macOS software in this version of VirtualBox, you can't do it because your CPU has no idea how that Apple silicon works and how it can be virtualized. The hypervisor has to be compatible with the guest operating systems that you're running on it, and VirtualBox is not compatible with that Apple silicon. But if you think about previous versions of macOS, which are not that old really, a few years old at this point, previous versions were built for Intel architectures. And technically, you should be able to get old versions of that software running in something like VirtualBox. But again, if you've tried that, it is not quite as simple as that. Apple has a relatively closed environment. It's not like Windows, where Microsoft will try their operating system across thousands and thousands of hardware combinations to ensure that it will run on practically any off-the-shelf computer. But Apple doesn't work that way. Apple has their own hardware. It is a closed environment with their own operating system. They don't have to have their software work across all of these thousands and thousands and thousands of systems because Apple makes their own systems. So although there are guides on the internet that will violate the terms of the end user license agreement and attempt to get macOS running in a virtual environment using an older version of the operating system that just barely is able to get installed, at the end of the day, it's a very, very poorly functioning version of macOS. It just doesn't work very well. So my recommendation is don't worry about it, because you don't need to have that level of detailed knowledge of macOS to be able to pass the Core 2 exam. Now, you might need another version of macOS to do other things in your environment. In fact, it's always a good idea to be as familiar with as many different operating systems as you can. But in this particular case, and considering that a lot of the older Mac Mini and other Mac hardware out there that's a little bit older than this can be found at a relatively reasonable cost, you may want to choose that. I'll also tell you there are some cloud-based providers out on the internet that will provide you with a way to get time on macOS. In fact, I know that AWS, the Amazon Web Services offering from Amazon, also has an option for a remote desktop type scenario with Apple's macOS. So that's a good way to be able to do that, to be able to access it legally at very good a nice fast performance. You're able to install software and really get a feel for it to be able to make that happen. So I would say that if you're trying to run macOS in a VirtualBox, it is a difficult, in some cases, nearly impossible task. And if you do manage to do it, you're not going to be happy with the performance. And at the end of the day, it's not something that's legally can be licensed anyway. So I think finding an option for that is a good idea, but it may not even be necessary. I think for the purposes of the exam, going through my videos and perhaps looking at other videos on YouTube dealing with macOS will probably be all you need to be able to pass that part of the exam. So don't worry so much about that. But a good question nonetheless. Let's get some other questions in here. You can, of course, submit your question at any time with the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in that answer. That's where we'll be taking all your questions going forward. So the one thing that I didn't do, and I need to kind of bring this up, we didn't mention it in this first hour. I mentioned that I would be able to give you continuing education unit credits, but I haven't given you the instructions yet. So here it is. Let's give it this. Normally I do this in the first hour. the first hour and 20 minutes. We'll stretch that out a little bit. How do you get continuing education credit for attending these study groups and being able to use them? Well, I'm glad you asked, because now I get to tell you. If you would like to earn an email that certifies that you are here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU, you need to follow these instructions, and make sure you follow these instructions because they are part of the process. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There is a Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, please put your name, your email address, and in the subject line, please put April 2024 Core 2. In the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, LDAp radius. Tried to pick a couple that we worked with earlier in the study group. LDAp radius is our super secret code words of the month. You need to put both of those in there. And you can also put anything else you would like in that message as well. I do read through every single one of these, but you don't have to put anything if you don't want to. Just put the super secret code words of the month, LDAp radius, hit send, and then in about a week, I turn these around. You'll get an email from me that has a digital signature, so you know nothing was changed in that document, that certifies that you have earned 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. Now, sadly, you're not able to watch 20 of these to renew your A+ certification. I think they only accept 4 of these in a 3-year renewal period. So you will have to find other CEUs to accumulate in other categories to complete that 20. But if you are somebody that is collecting CEUs and you're trying to get those for either CompTIA or for any other reason, I will be glad to send those to you. Again, go to the top or the bottom of the website, click the Contact Us link, put in your name, your email address, the subject line, put April 2024 Core 2, and in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, LDAP radius. And that will get you that particular CEU. So that's something you can do if you're in that 3-year period where you're trying to renew your certification. It's something that might help you as well. Other questions. Let's keep going through these. I kind of mentioned this earlier. I think it's worth talking about again. Is you've been watching the videos, you've got the course notes, you've gone through the questions, maybe you've done some hands-on, and now you're wondering, at what point am I ready to take this exam? How do I really know if I'm ready to be able to do that? One of the best ways is to refer back to the exam objectives. So let's do that. Let's bring up a set of the exam objectives. I have them right here. There it is. Let's make it so it's scrollable on my side. Here we go. So the exam objectives, this is for the 220-1102 exam. We'll go to the second page here. It tells you all about the exam itself and how they can be used. And you can see there's a different breakdown, the 4 different domains and how much information from those domains should appear on your exam. Now, as we start the exam objectives themselves, notice they're all bulleted. You can see the nice structure they have here. The first domain is operating systems, and subdomain 1.1 says, identify basic features of Microsoft Windows editions. So we need to know in Windows 10 editions, the home version, the Pro for workstations, and Enterprise. Now, for those of you familiar with Windows, there's a lot more Windows editions than that. But for the purposes of your exam, those are the 4 you need to know. And then we need to understand the feature differences. For example, domain access versus workgroup, desktop styles and user interface, availability of remote desktop protocol, RDP, random access memory support limitations, BitLocker, gpedit.msc, and then lastly, we need to understand upgrade paths, especially in-place upgrade. So there's a set of bullets that are all laid out for you for this first section of the first domain. And what I recommend to people is use this as your checklist. Can you describe to someone the differences between Windows 10 Home, Pro for Workstations, and Enterprise, and when you might use those? Can you explain the differences between domain access versus workgroup? How about the desktop styles or user interface of Windows? Can you explain the availability of remote desktop protocol, RDP? So all you have to do is step through each one of these bullets, and if you can answer it, you can check it off your list. If you can't answer it, You can circle, make a note of it, and come back to that so that you can completely fill in that list. And once you've finished those, let's go to the next section. Section 1.2, given a scenario, use the appropriate Microsoft command line tool. And you can see all the different command lines are here. You need to now know each one of those. So they really hit you right off at the very beginning of this exam with a lot of things to memorize. And this is a lot of information. So you need to understand these different commands: ipconfig, ping, hostname, netstat, nslookup, checkdisk, netuser, netuse, traceroute, format. You need to understand what those are. You need to understand when you would use them, and perhaps what they look like when you look at the output. And that's not the only set of commands. You need to do that for all of the commands that are here. Once you've checked all of those off your list, you go to the next section, 1.3, and you do the same thing all over again. So this is a lot of detail, certainly, but that's the good part. If you were to go to a Microsoft exam, a Cisco exam, a Red Hat exam, you don't even get anywhere close to this level of detail. CompTIA has effectively rolled out for you everything you need to know to pass this exam and listed everything in detail. They also give you some nuances here and some clues about the detail for these exams. For example, we'll go back up to the Microsoft command line tool section. Notice that we have command line tools like ipconfig. And there are a number of ipconfig options. In fact, there's a huge number of ipconfig options, but maybe only the top one or two are important. And in fact, practically nothing is written on the screen with detailed subcommands for each one of these utilities. That tells us that we don't need to have a full and complete knowledge of every possible option for every single one of these utilities. We just need to understand, given a scenario, which one of these would be the appropriate command to use. And that's the important part of this, is that you have to know where to stop. You could spend days going through all of these commands, but you may not need to go into that level of detail. So not only is this a great command line reference and gives us information on what we need to know for our exam, it also gives us a limitation of where we need to be for this. So I think if you're someone who is trying to work through the details of your certification, trying to know when should I focus on taking the exam, there's your checklist. Now you know. Now you can go find exactly what you're looking for and be able to break down the details, and you'll be ready when you get through it. Okay, now you know with a lot of certainty that you're ready to go take your exam, because now you know everything that is listed in the exam objectives. So that's the way you would work through all of that. Let's do some more questions that you have submitted into this list. Lot of these, a lot of folks, thank you for submitting questions, by the way, reminding me to do the continuing education unit credit. So a lot of you were able to remind me of that. So thank you for sending that in here. I appreciate that. Let's see. This is kind of setting this one up for me, that asks, hey, what type of secure communication server is your favorite? Like Discord, etc. There's a lot of different options out there for secure communication services. You've got options from Microsoft. You got Discord. There's tons available out on the marketplace. Discord's probably one of the more popular ones for the gaming community, but it has evolved itself into something that is beyond gaming, fortunately. And as I've already mentioned, at ProfessorMesser.com, we have a Discord server. It is our primary method of communicating to you in real time and allowing you to communicate with others in real time who are also going through their studies. Discord is ours of choice. Make sure that you go to ProfessorMesser.com/Discord if you would like to join that Discord. We have a lot of great folks in there. A lot of people that are technologists, just general technologists that like hanging out, talking with each other. And we have a lot of people that are studying for their A+, their Network Plus, their Security Plus, and other certifications. And as I mentioned before, you can even start up your own room anytime you'd like, host your own study session with your own friends, and you have complete control and management of that room. You can allow or disallow people in. You can go through and show your screen. You can step through different videos. It's a great place to learn. So have a look there. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/Discord to be able to join our Discord. So You really did set that one up for me quite nicely. Thanks for sending that question in. Other questions. Let's keep going through this list. One of the things that we were just looking at were the commands for Windows, for Linux. And there's actually a question someone submitted, said, do I really need to know all of those commands? Yes, you do. Now, you won't get all of those commands, here they are, on your exam. You will get some of these on your exam, almost certainly. So this is a pretty good place to maybe have a look at different options and things that will show up during your exam. But you don't get everything. Some people have mentioned they went to take their exam and they came back to me and said, wait, you have me study all of these like 15 different commands. I got asked 2 of them on my test. Yep, that's how industry certification exams work. They don't ask you every single thing. Otherwise, you'd have 1,000 questions on your exam. They ask you very specific things about parts of the exam objectives. So don't be thrown by that. That's just sort of normal for working with these industry exams. There's no possible way, realistically, the statistically, laws of physics apply. We can't ask you everything from every part of the exam objectives, unfortunately. Or maybe fortunately. We'll go with fortunately on that one. Other questions. Let's keep going through this list. This is one from Dylan, who says a lot here. Let me see if I can get the right screen up for you. Dylan asks, I have to pass both Network Plus and Security Plus within the next few months. How would you recommend doing that? Is Network Plus harder than Security Plus? Well, this is really an interesting one, because I think if you're someone who is just starting in the industry, that's quite a thing to go through. Going through Network Plus and Security Plus, just one of those can take 3 months on average for someone to really learn the information well enough to pass the exam. Now, if you've already been in the industry a little bit, you can certainly shorten that time frame. There have been people that come to my site, they've gone through all the videos, a week later they've taken their exam. That is certainly not normal. Normal is 2 to 3 months for each one of these. So knowing that, if you want to be able to pass your Network Plus and Security Plus, and you can throw A Plus into this as well. There's 2 exams, of course, for A Plus. So we're really talking about 2 different exams there. Each one of those on average, best case on average, is about 2 months. So if you wanted to do Network Plus and Security Plus, that's about 4 months for an average person to be able to get through all that content. So already you should start thinking, if you're in a position, Dylan, where someone has said you need to get these certifications, there's a particular time frame, you need this to either get a job or keep your job, you should already know that you need to work a little bit harder than what you're already thinking. Because if you were to do this as everyone else does it, it's going to take you about 4 months to get through both of those. So you may want to spend extra time study in the morning and the evening. You can shrink that down to 2 months, maybe, for both of those. There is a way to do this, but it's going to involve a lot more work on your side. You're going to be crunching through it. But the good part is after you get through that 2-month period of spending all of your waking hours, every spare moment studying that content, you'll have both of those certifications in your pocket, which is a nice bonus when you're finished with this. And because you can renew these certifications, you'll never have to take the exams again to maintain and keep your certs. So that is an important part of this, but it is a challenge. How would I recommend doing that? That's how I would recommend doing it. Use your exam objectives. Stay laser focused on the objectives. If you go grab a book on Network Plus or grab a book about Security Plus, books tend to go outside the scope of the exam objectives. Their perspective is they think they should teach you beyond the scope of the exam. That way you'll be able to hone in on those specific topics and you'll learn them a lot better. But it does take time. So if you're working with some materials for studying and you notice that they're not really sticking to the exam objectives, you may just want to skip over that part. Stick to the objectives. If you know every one of the objectives, you can put a check mark next to every bullet that's on the objectives, you're going to pass your exam. That's how good I feel about those objectives. That's how positive I am that those objectives match the exam almost perfectly. when you walk in there. So sticking to the objectives is going to be your key. It will keep you focused. It will keep you only needing what you need to know to pass these, and it's going to save you a lot of time, especially if you need to do both Network Plus and Security Plus. So hopefully that's giving you some tips anyway as you start your studies. And of course, head over to our Discord. That might shrink your time too. People are constantly testing each other. They're watching videos. They're discussing the different topics. Soak in all of these different study options, whatever they are and from wherever they come from. You need to grab as many of those as possible. You've got a lot to do in a very short time to do it. Let's keep going through the questions that you have submitted. Got quite a bit to step through. So other things that we have here, the other folks that are working through these, since we were just talking about taking the exam and what we think the right version or right testing strategy might be. This is from Maverick, who says, I'm sitting for my Core 2 exam tomorrow. I've been getting 69 to 75% on the practice exams. Do you think I'm ready? Well, I don't know, because I don't know which practice exams you took. I tend to like to see on practice exams that you get an 80 to 85%. I think that's a pretty good number for practice exams. But again, this really comes back to your exam objectives. I know I keep saying that, but it's really true. That is the document that is the real barometer for this. Go back to the practice exams, see if those practice exams are covering all of the topics that are covered in that list or a large number of them, and be able to check off any of that content. But use your practice exams, but also use the objectives. So once you finish your practice exams, go through the objectives, see if there's anything the practice exams didn't cover, and see if you can explain those, because that's going to be important as you go through the rest of these sets of exams. I think the practice exams is really the best way to test yourself, regardless of what you get on a set of practice exams. The exam objectives really are the best barometer. Okay, other questions. Let's move away. Now that let's say that you've gotten your certification, you are working your way into trying to get your very first job in the industry. And John asks, hey, Prof, I was wondering, in your opinion, what you think would be the best job to look for or best next action to take after passing the A+. Now, this is a question that really focuses on your personal goals and objectives. So I don't have the right answer for you, but I can talk to what some of the common answers are. And you need to figure out in your mind what makes the most sense for your personal goals, your professional goals, and perhaps what might be available in your immediate geography. When you get your A+ certification, you are now knowledgeable in a lot of different topics. You've spent time understanding a lot about hardware, networking, operating systems, security, and a lot of other topics as well. And when you start focusing on those, you'll notice that a lot of hiring managers want to hire people who have these types of certifications. So one of the first things I always recommend to folks is going out to the job posting boards that are used in your particular country or area and see what they're offering. So in the United States, you might want to go to LinkedIn Jobs or Dice.com or some of the other sites that are available. There's very large job posting sites out there, and look through those job posting sites for jobs that appear to be very similar to the information you just learned from your A+. So these would be jobs that might be an IT help desk, an IT service desk, a network operations center or NOC. In some cases, you might even be able to find a security operations center or SOC, depending on where you happen to live. Those types of environments almost always have entry-level positions. And that's really what we're looking for, is a foot in the door. It's probably not going to pay amazing. It's going to pay okay, but it's not going to be the highest end of what you can earn in IT. It's an entry-level position. But the one thing that is different for entry-level in IT is the upward mobility in IT is much more enhanced over other types of vertical markets. So if you were to become a nurse, there is upward mobility in nursing, but it's nowhere near the scale that you will find in IT. If you go into transportation, There's certainly upward mobility in transportation, but again, nowhere near what you'll find in IT. I would argue perhaps IT has the fastest way up than any other market or type of job that you might find. It just has a way to find things that are interesting to you, allow you to learn about those topics, and then constantly level up in the industry as you go. That's one of the things I think that is very, very different when you're in the job hunt, is trying to put all of that together. So one of the things that I did, and it's in the YouTube video description of this video, is a video on how to get a job in IT with no experience, which a lot of people find themselves in. They've gone to school, or maybe they've gotten a certification. Now they want to get a job in IT. What do? There are 4 very important elements that you should bring into this mix to add to your resume and to maximize the possibility of getting a job in IT. And I give you all 4 of those in that video. And I think it's a big video. It's like a 30-minute video. And for me, if you've watched my videos before, I don't really waste a lot of time in my video. There's not a big intro. There's not a big outro. It's really in the middle. We're focusing on getting as much information to you in a very high density mode. And it's the same thing with this video. So I talked to you about getting a formal education. I talked to you in this video about getting industry certifications and how important they might be. I talk about some practical experience and give you some examples of practical experience you can do before walking into your interview. And I tell you about the one thing that I think people don't consider enough, which is knowing someone who already works there. We like to hire people we know, or people that we already know that might be someone they know. So that network of friends, so to speak. So having those different elements included in your job hunt can be very, very valuable, and maybe the difference between you getting the job and you not getting the job. So it's more than any one thing. It's more than just education. It's more than just certification. It's more than just some practical experience. It's more than just knowing someone. It's a combination of those things. So you should try to maximize that. I would recommend you look through that video. I designed it to give you those tips and tricks that you can use to maybe find a different ideas of where you can look for jobs and how you can go after those individual positions for those jobs. That's a video that's in the YouTube video description of this video, how to get a job in IT with no experience, or something close to that. That's the title of it. You should be able to find it pretty easily. Okay, let's go have a look at another question. This is more of a technology question. This comes from Chris, who asks, with NAS being the go-to standard for backup and mirror your system, is RAID going away or for use in a business environment? So we've got a lot of technologies in this question. So let's break this down a little bit. NAS is certainly a popular standard to use for many different storage requirements. I use it for backup. I use my NAS for archiving data. I use my NAS for real-time access to data as a large data store. Instead of having all the data on my local system, I can put it on a much larger data store. You can imagine when you're making videos, each 15-minute video I make is about 10, 20 gig of video data. So I can't store all of that on my local machine. I have to put it somewhere else, and a NAS is a great place for that. NAS being that network attached storage. That is a technology that's relatively accessible as well. So you can purchase a NAS that might be a 1 or 2 drive NAS, plug it into your network, and now you have some storage connected to your network that you can access. My NAS, I think the current one I have is like a 20 or 22 terabyte NAS. It's not huge, but there's a lot of storage on that particular device because I have, I have like 15 different drives in it. So there's a lot of very high density drives, a lot of data that I store on that, and I use it for different things. Now, NAS itself is simply a mechanism for attaching storage to a network. What that storage is a completely different question. And as I mentioned, my single NAS, I have a portion of it set up for backups. I have another portion of it set up for storage, just being able to access data in real time. I've got another part of that NAS that's available for longer term storage. I hardly ever go back. Maybe pictures and videos, family type things are stored there. And it's one of those where we access that data occasionally. It's not real time access, but it's still on the NAS. Now, the data that I store in the NAS is in a format. I have all of these drives, and I'm using RAID, the redundant array of independent or inexpensive disks. And I set that drive array up so that if any of those physical drives fails, my data is still available. So I don't have to worry about that data not being available. I can pull out the bad drive. I can put in a replacement drive. It resynchronizes itself, and my data is still up and running. But that's not a backup. That is simply redundancy. That only ensures that the system continues to run. NAS and RAID specifically, RAID is not a backup mechanism. RAID is simply a way to keep a system running when a piece of hardware fails, in this case, a hard drive. I mention this because a lot of people think of RAID, especially when you think of mirroring. Mirroring is one where data is written to two drives simultaneously. And if one drive fails, you've still got the other copy on the other drive. That's a very common form of RAID. But it's not backup. But wait, I thought you said if we lose a drive, we still have the data. That sounds like backup. Well, it isn't. Because what if I do this? What if I have on this RAID array, I have a spreadsheet. Maybe I have years of financial data for my company, and I store it in a spreadsheet. Then one day, as I'm working on the spreadsheet, I hit Command A and Enter, which selects the screen and then deletes everything. And then I save the file, because that's what I do. I just commonly save it. Every once in a while, I save the file. I've just now taken years of data, and I've saved over that years of data an empty spreadsheet. All right, now on your RAID array, go get the backup. There isn't one. You overwrote the file on the RAID array. It's an empty blank file. Hopefully you have backups, because as I've told you through the years, RAID is not backup. RAID has never been backup. RAID will not be backup. You need to also back up the data that is on your RAID array so that you can then go back and grab those older files to be able to do that. That's why I mentioned on my NAS, I store files, but I also back up my systems to that same NAS on a separate part of the NAS. That way, if I do accidentally delete a file or overwrite information that's in a file, I can go back over time and find a previous version of the file, copy it over, and now I've restored that from the backup. So in this case, your NAS is a great way to maintain uptime and availability of the data, but it is not a way to back up the data. You have to have a separate backup process. It can certainly be a backup process that is writing the backup to the NAS. Ideally, you'd probably want the backup to go somewhere else, but I only have one NAS set up currently. My plan is to actually run multiple NAS in the studio and at home and have separate backups going to both of those, so that I just have another set. And you might even want to consider, and this is an important one, you might want to consider going to and having offsite backup. And I use offsite backup as well at the same time. So I am backing up to the cloud in real time right now. I'm backing up to my NAS, does that every hour. And now I have multiple places I can go to this data. And that's the important part of backups, is to always have that multiple parts of it. You may have noticed we mention whenever we're working through these, especially on something like working through trying to get files and trying to transfer data, it's always nice to have a backup. It's very easy to overwrite data. So having it on the NAS is good. Having it on the cloud is better. And in fact, in your Core 2, we talk about backup strategies, things like GFS. GFS is a great strategy. If you're not familiar with GFS, make sure you go have a look at that as well. Another great way to do it. And we talk about backups all the way through these series, A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. It's an important consideration. Make sure you're familiar with all of those. Let's do some more questions. Let's keep going through this list. We talked earlier about getting your first job in IT. Let's talk about your second job in IT. This is a question from Mark, who asks, "Hi, I'm working as a help desk analyst for the past 2 years. I passed Core 1101, the Core 1, studying for the 1102. My question is, what is the next step after Help Desk? So there you go. The next step after Help Desk. This is not an easy question because the direction that people go in IT, it's not on a rail. It's not like there is a specific order you must have a job in IT. IT, you can do whatever you would like. So at this point, you've been working the past 2 years in your Help Desk Analyst. You probably know a lot of people in the organization in the desktop management field. They probably work on the desktop. Maybe you talk a lot to the server team. Maybe you communicate with the networking team. Maybe you've worked with the security folks. Maybe there's a compliance team, a database team, an email team, a data center team. You see the idea. There are different types of technologies spread across your organization, and each one of those is an opportunity to change your career, to move your career forward, to level up in your career. And I'll bet after 2 years, you probably have a pretty good idea of different technologies you enjoy. When I was working in a corporate help desk, I really was very interested in the desktop. That was the very first thing. I was interested in not just managing the desktop and troubleshooting and making sure it continued to run, but how do you manage those? How do you administer those systems remotely? How do you set one up with automation? So you just turn it on and it builds itself automatically based on a set of criteria that you specify. It's a science unto itself. You can do this with servers. You can do it with workstations. It is a remarkable thing to be able to do. And I got very interested in that and moved into the field dealing specifically with desktop management. Then as I got into desktop management, learned about the automation, became and improved my expertise in the desktop, you get to a point where you start to know a lot about that particular technology. And when you get to that point, you should already be thinking to yourself, how do I keep going? How do I move up to the next level? So you may be 2 years in a desktop management role and you think, that server team, I know a lot about Windows. There's a lot of things similar on the server side, but now there's Active Directory and I've got all these trees and we're doing these different clusters and we're working through a lot of different Windows technologies and we got a lot of Azure configurations. Maybe that's where I need to go, is on that side and understanding more about what we can do from the clustering side, from the server side. So maybe I should go work on the server team. That would be good to know. So each one of these steps will be along the lines of the things you like to do. So make sure you become familiar and you work with the folks on the desktop management team. You probably know some of them. What about the server team? Reach out to those folks and ask them, do you have any openings? Are there things I need to work on? What certifications might be good? If you needed to hire somebody today, what would convince you to hire me? What things should I do so that you're comfortable with that? I mean, that's a pretty good question. That's very directed. And if maybe you're into networking, maybe you want to join the network team, go talk to the network team and ask them what types of things might be good. Can I shadow you one day and see some of the things you're doing? If you're working on the weekend or installing new equipment, I'd like to watch. I'd like to see what's going on. Show some interest in the technologies themselves and invest your time and your effort into it, and it will be noticed. And that could earn you that job as your next level up in the industry. And it doesn't have to be any of those. You may find that you like doing cloud computing. You like the automation part of it. You're good at writing scripts. Maybe that's where you should go. So everybody has a different idea of what that particular job is, but there are always ways to level up out of the help desk. You just need to decide what those are based on the opportunities in your area, the job postings that are available in your company, and maybe some of the things you're most interested in. Because ultimately, you're going to be doing this all day, every day. You should probably find a technology that interests you. And the good part about this is nothing in IT is forever. The technology itself is not forever. The things that I started working on in this career of IT, a lot of the things I learned are no longer even used. So that is the thing that we often run into, is that a lot of things are still used. I'm still running Ethernet. The Ethernet frame that I used 25 years ago is the same Ethernet frame that I'm running today, effectively. So there are things you will be able to pull all the way through your career, all day, every day. Subnetting, knowing Ethernet, understanding Windows, having an understanding of operating systems in general, Linux and Unix, they're just always going to be here. So that's one where you might want to become familiar with those technologies too. They might help you quite a bit as you're working through those. Other topics. Let's keep going through this list. Next on our list, other topics that we have. So I have a lot of questions that are coming through, by the way. Thank you so much for submitting those. Next on our list, other questions. A lot of you are asking questions about, are there other courses that you're going to do? Well, I think I can give you a definitive maybe. I think I'm just as good as CompTIA is at answering those questions. Maybe, maybe not. Sure, maybe not. We don't know yet. It's one of those where I never would probably announce it anyway until it was done and then released it. That way, there's no worry or wonder about when these things are going to be released and having those there. So I think that's a good example when you start working through at least the breakdown of technology. That's a really good one to focus on. I think if you're someone who is working in technology and you want to find ways to maximize your knowledge, I think this is a good way to do it. Submitting questions, make sure you submit more. We've got plenty of great questions you folks are put in here, and I think a lot of these are spot on with some of the things that you're working through today. Here's one that references back to a question we had earlier today. This is a question about authentication. It's from Ben, who asks, what's the difference between LDAp and Kerberos? You recall we had a question earlier in the study group where we talked about LDAp and Kerberos and TACACS Plus and Radius, along with multi-factor authentication. And one of the things that comes up often, this comes up a lot in Network Plus too, is these authentication protocols. Being able to authenticate with Kerberos, it seems like LDAp does a similar thing, allows us to authenticate with our username and password. Hey, TACACS Plus allows us to authenticate using our username and password. And obviously Radius does a similar thing. So we have all of these, what seem to be very similar technologies doing effectively the same thing. Are they the same thing? And which one do we use? What is really the difference between all of these? Well, the reason we have such differences and different options available is that in some cases, there are minor nuances between these that make a big difference. Let's take, for example, Windows. With Windows, we need a secure way of logging in, of authenticating to the network. We need to be sure that it's secure. And for Windows, one of the features that I think a lot of people really like and maybe don't even think about very much is the single sign-on feature, where you can authenticate at the beginning of the day. And then when you connect to a printer, you connect to a share, you send information to another user, you log into email, or you connect to your email app, you're never getting prompts for additional usernames and passwords. It just automatically knows it's you somehow and provides you with the appropriate access for your account. Now, it does that because there is a relatively complex cryptographic process that uses Kerberos. And that Kerberos process is one that is built into the way that Windows operates. So that's fantastic. But that functionality of single sign-on, for example, is not available in LDAP. It's not something built into Radius. It's not included with TACACS Plus. It's something that is in Kerberos and is built into Kerberos. Now, there are additional things you could add on to LDAP, or you could add on to TACACS Plus or to Radius to provide additional single sign-on functionality, but it's already built into Kerberos. So that may be the reason that they chose that. In fact, it probably is the case that if you are in a Windows environment, you're probably using Kerberos and able to access and authenticate using that Kerberos database that exists within Active Directory. Really an Active Directory database, and Kerberos is the protocol used to access it. Another thing that's interesting about Windows is there is an LDAp front end to that same Active Directory database. Why would you need LDAP if you already have Kerberos? I just told you how great Kerberos was and how it does everything, and it has single sign-on, and there's cryptography for security. Well, why would you use LDAP? Well, you may be installing a new firewall. That firewall is able to communicate to Active Directory, but the firewall doesn't talk Kerberos. It doesn't have any Kerberos functionality. Kerberos is relatively complex. And so maybe if all you're doing is authenticating a username and password, and you don't need single sign-on, and you don't need the cryptographic capabilities, and you don't need to have a ticket that's carried around, a cryptographic ticket, all you're doing is verifying a username and a password, then maybe you can use the LDAP front end to do that. It's relatively simple. It takes very little overhead, and it's something very standardized that you'll find across many different operating systems and many different devices. So although that firewall is not running Windows, it can still communicate to your Windows Active Directory using a well-known and very popular protocol such as LDAP. Similar things happen if you have a huge Cisco environment, for example. You probably have a TACAX server. And that TACAX server is one probably primarily used for that environment, for that Cisco environment. So if you have another device, maybe a server, and that server needs to authenticate to that database, we can use TACAX for that if you happen to have a TACAX front end for your server. So a very easy way to make that happen. And I think that's very common. And Radius is a similar scenario. Radius is a very open protocol. It's been running for a very long time. You'll find it available, Radius servers available in practically any operating system. So maybe if you already have a Radius server and you have a database, or maybe you're set up that firewall and the firewall says, we can connect to LDAP or Radius. Hey, we have a Radius server. Let's use Radius for that. So often it's what you're already running that dictates which protocol you're going to use. Or maybe it's the style of network that you have that dictates which one of those authentication protocols you're going to take advantage of. And there's sometimes nuances and specifics. Other times it's just a very broad overview. And that's why sometimes you might use LDAP. Sometimes you might use Kerberos. Sometimes you might use Radius. Sometimes you might use TACAX. The answer of when you would use it is kind of a bad answer. It depends. Depends on a lot of different things, but it certainly depends probably on what you're already running, and we fit it into an existing environment. Nobody wants to build out a brand new authentication database just so you can get a firewall running. Let's use authentication we already have. It also makes it very easy, by the way, if you've got all of your users configured in Active Directory, and we can access Active Directory using LDAP. That means if somebody leaves the organization, the authentication that's happening between the firewall and that database will not authenticate properly. So sometimes it's built into your onboarding and offboarding process, and you don't have to do anything to make sure that the VPN capability on the firewall is authenticating properly because it's already built into your overall authentication strategy. Just makes sense. Let's see if we can get through another question. I know we're top of the hour, which is always short of time, but I do want to see if there's another one here that I can kind of focus on and give you an idea on. Such great questions that have come in, by the way, to work through these. One of the things that I often will see, there are a lot of questions in here. There's so many questions in here about this that I think it's probably worth talking about and breaking down the specifics of it. The specifics of Windows and working through some of these Windows commands can be useful. A lot of people talk about abbreviations. There's so many questions I got in here about abbreviations and how much of the abbreviations do we need to know, and how can we remember all of these abbreviations. So let's take that question and see what we can do with it. First, I'm going to take you back to, that's right, the exam objectives. Not to look through the objectives themselves. We've already gone through these bulleted objectives. I'm going to go to the very back of the objectives. Let's go to the single page view. I'm just going to scroll down through all of the objectives, scroll, past section 3, past domain 4. And after you get past domain 4 in the core 2 objectives, you will get to a page that says the CompTIA A+ Core 2 2011-02 acronym list. The following is a list of acronyms that appear on the CompTIA A+ Core 2 exam. That's not exactly true. Candidates are encouraged to review the complete list and attain a working knowledge of all listed acronyms as part of the comprehensive exam prep program. Now, this is more than just understanding an acronym and what the letters stand for. And I think a lot of people will focus on that. They'll create flashcards that say AP access point. AP on one side of the card, access point on the other side of the card. And they'll say AP. AP stands for access point. Got it right. Next. Okay. APFS. That stands for Apple File System. Right. Let's go to the next. And they'll kind of focus on knowing the name and knowing the abbreviation, or vice versa. And I can tell you that certainly has some value associated with it, but sometimes it doesn't help you very much. And it practically doesn't help you at all for the exam. For example, you will never get a question on your exam that says, what does the abbreviation AP stand for? Is it access point, Apple pair, associated procedure? You know, you're not going to get that. That's not a question you get on your exam. I refer to those often as trivia questions. There are no trivia questions on your exam. The questions on your exam are usually involving a scenario, and they will put these abbreviations in the question as context to the problem that is occurring. A user is having a problem authenticating to an AP, and then they give the error message the user is getting. What could the problem possibly be? And they'll list out a number of things. One of those problems might be related to a wireless configuration option. Okay, well, if you know that AP is access point, then you know that the answer is probably going to be related to something wireless. So there is some connection there with knowing that AP means access point, but even access point doesn't necessarily in your mind say, oh, it's wireless, unless you really know what an access point is. There's a number of questions or acronyms like this in the list. So let's take an example of this one. The ATX. ATX is an acronym that stands for Advanced Technology Extended. That doesn't tell me anything. That is no explanation of what ATX is. Advanced Technology Extended. It's not even a good acronym. But it's a really good example of how memorizing the letters and the words that go with the letters can sometimes be worthless. That's not going to help you. And you are not going to get a question on your exam that says, what does the acronym ATX stand for? You're never going to get that. So this is one of those scenarios where maybe you want to add an additional variable to your flashcard. Maybe you want to say, I want to know the abbreviation, I want to know the name, but then I also want a description of what that is or how it would be applied into our technology or our network. So go the extra step with your acronyms. Do not spend time just memorizing letters and words, letters and words, letters and words. That has limited value. You want to instead memorize the letter, the words, and then what that does for you. What value does that bring? What technology is associated with that? That's what's going to help you on this exam, is breaking down details about these. You've already seen that in the study group we just did. I gave you 5 answers, and all 5 of those answers were abbreviations. Just knowing the words of those abbreviations may not necessarily have helped you very much, but understanding how those technologies can be used answers the question for you. And it's very common that you'll see that in CompTIA questions. The other thing they tend to do is pepper those abbreviations into the questions themselves with no other context, and you have to know what that is. You have to know what that stands for so that you can then answer the questions that come through. So focus on that piece of it. I think the abbreviations and the acronyms that are listed in the exam objectives are relatively straightforward. Most of them are pretty good. Some of these are not exactly what I would focus on. For example, they still have CD and CDFS in the acronym list, but compact discs and digital and that type of media isn't part of the exam any longer. I mean, who's using CDs anymore to transfer data? Nobody is, and it's not part of the A+. Previous version it was. They still have it in the acronym list. So that's why I mentioned earlier when I saw that statement, the following is a list of acronyms that appear on the CompTIA A+ Core 2 exam. Is it? Really? I think some of these might not be, but fortunately, most of these are. So you can probably figure out yourself which ones apply and which ones don't apply to this. I mean, they even still have FAT 12. FAT 12? FAT 12 is in this list. FAT 16 is in this list. You're not going to see that on the exam. In fact, I think they may go into FAT 32 on the exam, but not FAT 12. May not even do FSB anymore. Frontside bus. They don't cover that anymore on the exam. I mentioned GFS earlier. Grandfather, father, son. That might help you on the exam. So some of these are really good to have for your exam. Some of these are a little bit out of date. They don't tend to spend a lot of time making sure that these are spot on for the exam, but you'll be able to figure it out relatively easily whenever you're working through the details of this. I think that's probably where you should focus your efforts anyway. I think that might help you understand what you should study for the exam. And once you go through all of the exam objectives, you go through all the acronyms, you've gone through some practice exams, I think you'll be in good shape. I think that's where you need to know what's important for the exam and where you should focus your efforts. Hopefully that's given you some perspective on what you can focus on for your exam. Maybe this study group was able to help you a little bit. If it was, we would love it if you would give this video a thumbs up. We would love it even better if you would go to our YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube and subscribe. It really does help us a huge amount. Something you can do for free, and it just makes our day when that happens. Thank you so much for your support and continuing to support us. Whenever you do that, thumbs up or you subscribe to the channel, YouTube makes a notice of this, and then other people are able to see these videos and get that job or get a better job because they were able to earn their certification. You may be paying it forward just a little bit. I want to thank everyone for being here in the study group today. We love doing these live events, and we've got another one next week. Make sure you stop back by on Wednesday of next week for our Network Plus study group. And the week after that, we've got our Security Plus study group. If you ever want to know when the next live event is going to be, you can always go to our website at professormesser.com/calendar or choose the events link at the top of the page on our main menu. That's another great way to know when the next live event is going to be. We want to thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.